Welcome to Agatha Christie She Watched, our spoiler-heavy look at the movie and TV adaptations of the mystery genre's greatest writer. I'm Bill Peschel of Peschel Press, publisher of the annotated novels of Agatha Christie, and today we're talking about crusading prosecutors, aging courtesans, murderous villains, and strangers on a train. It's the Murder on the Orient Express episode from Checkmate, the Chinese TV series, the first from the Agatha Christie estate that they authorized, that debuted this year. But first, let me introduce my partner in marriage as well as crime of the fictional kind, Teresa Peschel. Hello, Teresa. How you doing today?
Hi, here we are talking again about one of my favorite things, which is murder on a train. Oh, if only the United States had a railway system like this. We would have never gone to airplanes, which are buses in the sky. Even third class looked pretty good. What a train. I have to wonder if any part of that train was real. What a train. It looked even better than the trains that David Suchet as Hercule Poirot rode on. Wow.
It is a fantasy
It was
train.
A fantasy train.
This is
My
the kind of train that would have taken the kids to Hogwarts, in style.
Oh my goodness. I think it was on a wider gauge too, because that corridor and those compartments were positively palatial. We're talking about first class here, obviously, certainly not cattle car, but like us, even the third class seating, where our hero, lawyer Situ Yan, is seated in the beginning in third class seating, rows of benches all facing forward. That's still better than a lot of American train travel. But then you move up into first class, and the dining car and the private compartments, they were the size of, they were 10 by 10 rooms. It was amazing. I can't imagine that there is a train out there where anything other than a private rail car. Private rail cars will be that palatial.
But not
rented
that wide.
But not
they
that
still
wide.
Have to follow the rail gauge. Reality still intrudes.
Yes, and I think they must use a wider gauge on the train tracks in China, which leads, of course, to...
Now, before we get down any further, this little mouse hole here, we need to talk about Checkmate.
Oh, right. Right. That's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about Agatha Christie and not trains.
That's
Even
right.
though she does murder on trains several times, because the mystery of the blue train also involves death on a train.
Right.
And the Plymouth Express, that was death on a train. I know that there are others, and certainly we see Poirot traveling on trains
all
lot.
the time, yeah. But those were the big three, the two novels and the short story.
Yeah, pretty sure. But anyway, so someday I will get to ride on the Orient Express. Someday, like Agatha did, only probably the service won't be as good.
Right.
Anyway, Checkmate is a Chinese language production of a number of Agatha Christie short stories. They are primarily Poirot. The Agatha Christie wiki page actually lists this and tells you what the individual episodes are. For the purposes of the book, we're only watching the opening 3 episodes. The opening 3 episodes, because they cover Murder on the Orient Express. What they're actually doing is a 24-episode arc. Each episode is about 45 minutes long. Each 3 episodes plus a little bit of the beginning of the next episode to tie up the loose ends is one complete Agatha Christie novel, or in the case of The Disappearance of the Prime Minister, a short story. And there seems to be, based on what I saw, there is an overall arc for this 24-episode series. Because we open with our crusading lawyer, and I'm going to butcher the Chinese names, and I still have trouble telling which is I think the names on the wikis are in correct Chinese order. That is, you do family name and then given name, I think.
I'm going to operate on that assumption because that's my understanding of it as well.
Yeah,
so the prosecutor is Situ Yan.
And he has basically an open and shut case. The series opens with
Ma Xingyang.
And there's a fairly important person in Beijing, and he is walking down the train concourse with his assistant, who might be Situ Yan, but I'm not sure. I can't remember now. He's walking down the train concourse. They're going to get on the train, and they're talking about some important vote that is coming up, and he is apparently, the council member is voting in a way that other people don't like. And Ma Xiyang comes up in the crowd and shoots the council member. In the back. In a crowded train concourse. He pockets his revolver and he saunters off looking not guilty. Within minutes, though, people realize that he is the one who did it, and he ran for it. He gets arrested, dragged off to jail, and then the next time we see him, he is in a very plush courtroom, everybody looking very formal, very elegant, very polished, love the shoulder capes on everything. Our crusading attorney is Situ Yan, and he has an open and shut case, and he is proving that Ma Shiyang, who is apparently not a nice person, murdered the council member in cold blood. And then at the last minute, as he is getting ready to close his case, someone comes up at the back of the court and announces, we have evidence that this didn't happen. All of you eyewitnesses are completely wrong. You're blind. Who are you going to believe? Your lying eyes or me? And here's this important paperwork that says, by the way, that Ma Shiyang is a Russian citizen, and so our laws do not apply to him. And the judge looks at the papers and says, okay. Situ Yan is just horrified. He knows this man did it. He proved this man did it. And now this man, who is a murderer, is being let go. And then, to make it even more upsetting, the Chinese press announces that the reason why Ma Shiyang was let go was not because of this obvious corruption, but because Situ Yan didn't know how to prosecute a case, and he let a murderer go because he did such a bad job.
Yeah, so he's taking the fall for it.
He is the patsy. In the audience in the courtroom, as it turns out, there are a number of people watching who are very, very interested in Ma Shiyang's court case, and they want to see him found guilty and hung by the state.
We should also point out this is not set in the current Chinese state, but around 1910 to 1920, when the Republic of China. So this is the previous government.
Oh, yes, because you can't set anything in current times in China without being extremely careful to not run afoul of the Chinese communist government.
So we have Situ Yan in disgrace, and he's going to go to another city.
Yes, his career is over in Beijing. He's been publicly humiliated, and he doesn't even know why these newspaper stories are being printed about how this man is being let go, as though it was his fault when he had nothing to do with it. The judge made this choice. So the next scene, he's getting ready to get on the train for Harbin, and he and his brother, it looks like, are sitting and eating at an outdoor noodle shop. An incident occurs where they look like military police. There's a young man who's obviously in charge of a small detachment of military police. They look like military police. They are apparently not military, and they're not the local policemen, but it's like some in-between category.
They're wearing uniforms.
They are in uniform.
It says, now again, this is something that they would understand in China, but we don't. They're in uniform. They're in obvious, what looks like to us, military uniforms, very sharp.
And they're obviously in some position of authority. And there is an incident at the outdoor noodle shop where one of the policemen is accused by the leader, Luo Xiaochuan.
Yeah, Lulu Xiaochuan.
Even though there's no L in it, folks, Google Translate says that there's an L in there, even though there isn't.
And we mention his name because he's going to partner up with Situ Yan later. So this is their initial meeting. It's the Holmes meets the Watson.
Yes, exactly. This is Holmes meets Watson. This is Poirot meets Hastings. And
because they encounter each other because Lulu Xiaochuan hears Situ Yan's name being mentioned. He recognizes the guy as Situ Yan and confronts him silently.
Oh, you worthless bastard, you worthless fool.
Without saying anything.
Without saying anything.
Just in a look.
And then
and then he has to deal with this case of a stolen weapon. His weapon.
Yes, his weapon is stolen, and he is sure that it's one of his soldiers, which makes no sense. But Situ Yan, who is obviously the Poirot, obviously the Sherlock, he leaps to his feet and realizes what actually happened, which is that the noodle seller has vanished, and he is the one who stole the pistol.
Right, because a button was found that was supposedly off the guy's uniform, but he sniffs the button and smells the fish oil on it that leads him to the noodle seller.
And then he chases him down, and then the noodle seller confesses that he stole the pistol because justice was not done. Poor people, unconnected people don't get justice. And this is exactly the sort of thing that upset Situ Yan because, here he was prepared to administer justice with the law, and an obvious murderer gets off because somebody powerful wants him to get off. So Situ Yan is faced with his soon-to-be sidekick, Lulu, are faced with the noodle seller stole the pistol because, his daughter was raped and then she committed suicide, and the man who did it got off because he was better connected, and there is no justice for people like us.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way he could administer justice was to steal the pistol because it was the only way he could get one, and then shoot the rapist. There is no justice if you aren't important enough to get it. And the wealthier you are, the more justice and mercy you get, and the better connected you are, the more justice and mercy you get. And that is obviously the underlying sub-theme. So Situ Yan proves himself to Lulo that he recognized what actually happened as opposed to what he thought happened. And they part, and Situ Yan gets on the train, and he's in the third class seating, and my goodness, even for third class, that looked really sparklingly clean, far cleaner than I would have expected, and nobody had a chicken in a cage, but maybe they're down in fourth class. And Lulo sees him and says, "You're coming up to first class with me."
He has to pay him back because he kept Lulu from executing an innocent soldier.
Yes, exactly.
And resolve the situation quietly as well, because he is able to help the noodle seller basically escape with the theft. The gun is returned. Maybe justice will be met out some other way, but that's beyond the scope of the episode. But the point, though, is that Lulu owes Situ Yan, and this is how he's paying him back by saying, "Come up to first class."
And they have a little problem with the conductor. This is the equivalent of the Pierre-Paul Michel character in Murder on the Orient Express. The entire first-class seating has already been, all of the compartments are sold, there is no space. Oh, but what about this one room here?
That hasn't been occupied.
The ticket has been sold, but the man hasn't showed up, and this is right out of the text. And Lulo, who apparently has not just the uniform, but apparently he has some pull, and I think that that's revealed later on in the series, he demands that Situ Yan be given this very nice first-class compartment. Not one of the super plush first-class compartments, because you will see is super plush when you see the Count and Countess and the Princess Dragomirov's compartments. They got the really plush ones. So suddenly, Situ Yan is exactly in the same position as Poirot on Murder on the Orient Express. He's in a compartment he didn't expect to be in, and they head off into the night, and things happen. He meets people, and then in the middle of the night, Ma Shiyang, who is on the same train, that is the Samuel Ratchet character, and then in the morning they find his body. The train is stopped in the middle of the night because there's a revolution up ahead, and the tracks.
There's a couple of bandits. I looked over at the clips, and I was like, the Lee brothers. They're doing something up above, and they may have torn up the tracks.
Yeah, torn up the tracks. So the train had to stop.
So it's
because trains
avalanche.
Without tracks can't go anywhere.
It's snowy. It's still snowy, but
still
not
snowing.
deep enough.
It's still snowing, and everybody is cold, and you can see a lot of people. Again, I really have to think that they did a lot of this on sound stages with CGI, because when you think about how cold it is, you don't see anybody's breath.
You do, actually.
You?
When they're walking outside. I think you're still correct, because there's something about cold weather that you can tell it's cold. It's like when we saw the Kenneth Branagh Death on the Nile. And nobody was sweating. There wasn't the Nile breezes blowing through their hair. And it looked obviously like they're on a soundstage, a beautifully equipped soundstage. And I think the same thing here.
Yeah, beautifully equipped. And oh my goodness, this is just such wonderful eye candy. It's sumptuous. Events roll forward as you would expect in Murder on the Orient Express. Now, they don't have the full complement of 12. It's a complement of 9. Bill and I worked out who is who. So
we're going to refer to the characters by their names in the book, because we'll stop the butchering of a respected
Chinese
language.
Names, gosh.
And we'll just call them, we'll still use Situ Yan and Lulu, but everybody else will get their novel names.
Shiyang, that's the Samuel Ratchet, he is murdered. And on board the train is his secretary. That would be Hector McQueen. You expect to see him. There's the conductor, Pierre-Paul, and then see, I'm going to butcher the French names.
Honest, we have not been drinking this. It's 1:40 in the afternoon.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
It's 5 o'clock somewhere. It is Sunday.
But Not everybody has an equivalent because there are only 9 characters on the train. There's also an eager young newspaper reporter who is going to be important in later episodes.
He's going to be part of the gang.
So you get, obviously, Samuel Ratchet, his secretary Hector McQueen, the conductor Pierre-Paul Michel. There's a young student. She's probably about 20 years old, and she is probably closest to Mary Debenham, and she's wearing this absolutely beautiful outfit. It is pale blue with a pale blue cape, trimmed in white fur with little snowflakes embroidered on it, and wow, she looks wonderful. And Lulo certainly notices. He tries to hit on her. There is a character who doesn't have an equivalent in the novel, and that is Liao Yun, and she turns out to be Yu Quin's mother. Yu Quin and her daughter are the equivalent of the victims in Murder on the Orient Express, the Armstrongs. It's right. Mrs. Armstrong and her daughter Daisy. Her husband is already dead. He died in a naval accident. You get 2 mothers because Liao Yun does not play the part that Mrs. Hubbard does, who actually was Sonia Armstrong's mother. The Mrs. Hubbard character is played by a friend of Yu Quin, and that is Ki Hong, formerly a courtesan, and as it turns out, she is now an intrepid reporter, including one of the reporters who wrote a blasting story about how Situ Yan let Ma Xiang go.
I thought she was also a singer, though.
That's what she told him.
Oh.
That's what she told him.
Story.
But he did the Sherlock and looked at her fingers and said, your fingers don't have the calluses that you would get from playing some Chinese stringed instrument like a lute or something like that. You have the markings on your fingers of a writer, of an ink stained wretch.
Right.
But she is obviously the Mrs. Hubbard parallel. She is the one with the men in and out of her compartment. She is the drama queen. She is the one saying, look at me, oh my God, so that you pay attention to her and don't see anything else. The parallels for Count Andreni and Countess Andreni are George Brell, who is the only Westerner in the cast. His name is Karl Dominic, and he's actually Polish-Canadian, and he has a career in China as an all-purpose Westerner.
Who speaks Chinese?
I'm sure his Chinese is exquisite.
He has a Chinese wife.
And he has a Chinese wife who is, of course, the equivalent of Sonia Armstrong's sister. There is a Colonel Arbuthnot equivalent, and that is Zhong Yang. He is the soldier who's out of uniform, who's retired. You get Princess Rong Xiang, who is obviously Princess Dragomirov. She has her maid, who is the Hildegard Schmidt character. So you have 9 of them, and there are 9 stab wounds. The doctor for second class comes up and takes a look at the body. The plot follows along like Murder on the Orient Express. Right. You have the woman in the Red Chiang song, you have the mysterious younger conductor, you have the missing button, you have the pearl that was missing, you have the pipe cleaner, you even
have the note, the burned note.
The burned note, and you have the fake threatening letters too. Everything is there. Then you get the complications at the end, which is that obviously Situ Yan, he is not Hercule Poirot, and he really wants to push for truth and justice, and the young woman, the Mary Debenham equivalent, this is the student in the beautiful pale blue embroidered with snowflakes, she says, I arranged this. I made sure that each of these people connected to Yu Quin's family were here. I wanted them to be witnesses to Samuel Ratchet's death. I wanted them to see what happened because I am the one responsible for her death, because I am the one who told Samuel Ratchet, because I was an 8-year-old schoolgirl at the time and didn't know any better. And I said, oh, there's nobody at home besides the 2 of them. And he came in and murdered them and raped them. Oh, I'm not sure if I got
not in that order.
Hopefully not in that. Well, maybe it would have been better in that order. I don't know. Either way, it's vile. She feels so much guilt, and she agrees with Situ Yan. Yes, murder is a capital crime, and it should be punished. And I murdered her, and I set all of this up, and I am the one who should go to the gallows. None of these innocent people who all then leap to their feet and contradict her because they all obviously
they all
did it.
do it, just like in the traditional solution.
They all did it, and they do not want to see her, a young woman with her entire life ahead of her, sacrifice herself. And the princess is ready to go to the gallows because she's old and she's lived her life. And what Ratchet did was wrong, and he got away with it. And this is where it becomes interesting, where they are doing something different with Checkmate. When Agatha wrote her novels, she never really tied them to any overall arc. The Checkmate series has taken 8 separate Poirot properties. If you want to bring it up on your screen, Bill, you'll be able to see it. It's the Checkmate Agatha Christie wiki page.
Actually, I already have the notes here because I found them earlier, and it is Orient Express, Roger Ackroyd, something called The Four Suspects, a Miss Marple short story, The Dentist Murder, which is...
the 1-2 Buckle My Shoe.
Right. 5 Little Pigs, The Kidnapped Prime Minister, 3-Act Tragedy, and Curtain.
And Cat Among the Pigeons, I thought, was in there, too.
It might be, but it wasn't on this list that I found.
The thing is, Ma Shi-ying got away with murdering Yu Qin and her daughter. And then 12 years later, he's in Beijing, and he gets away with murdering an important local government official. How is it that he was rescued at the last minute from his trial, so he got away with it again?
So
and
maybe the point of the rest of the series is finding out who's behind all this.
Yes, that there is some overarching conspiracy, something along the lines of that dreadful Poirot novel, The Big Four, where Agatha and her brother-in-law stitched together 12 short stories to make a bigger novel to fulfill a contractual obligation. And, worldwide conspiracy and everything like that. And the movie, by the way, was pretty good.
It was much better than the novel.
Oh, my God. Mark Gatiss did an amazing job. So when you sit down to watch Checkmate, what's actually going to happen is the first 3 45-minute episodes will bring you up to the climax. And then in the episode 4, you have the climax and the finish where Situ Yan, he realizes that justice was done. These people did justice, and he lets them go.
Right. It's like the first 10, 15 minutes.
Then you move on to the second story where he starts finding a different place for him, and he meets Lulau again because it turns out that they have connections in Harbin.
But it's not like the episode ends and you have the credits. It just moves on. He arrives in Harbin. He gets off the Orient Express. He sees everybody off. He goes into town. And it's just literally a seamless transition.
A seamless transition.
The next story.
And then you move into the next story. And you realize at the climax that during the trial of Ma Shi-ying that Situ Yan was prosecuting, every one of those 9 people was in the audience. There's a specific word for the people watching a trial. I can't remember what it is. I don't think
just
it's
the spectators.
It's the audience. It's the spectators. It's the gallery. They were all there because they wanted to see him hung. Mm-hmm. And of course, that is not what happened. Then they move on to the plot of murdering him on the train. Once again, justice was not done until they did it. And the next bunch of episodes are individual novels and a couple short stories, but with the overarching theme of who is behind Ma Shi-ying, who made sure that he got off for murder at least twice.
In a way, what they're doing is they did the same thing Agatha did with the Big Four, taking existing stories and linking them together in an overall arc.
So that's exactly what they're doing. And I'm really looking forward to seeing the rest of it. We're not going to watch them for the book and for the podcast because it just takes too much time. But I am going to watch them and I am going to review them for the website because they look wonderful. They look really interesting. It's a very different. The French takes have been very different. The Japanese takes have been very different. And yet it is still recognizable, the human component of there is no justice for people like us. We were not given justice.
In this, it's more class-based. They all talk about it's the peasants who don't get justice. In some of the previous episodes, it's just we didn't get justice in this particular case. It's always particularized on the individual. Here, it's more of a class element.
Oh, yes, like the noodle seller at the beginning. He knew he wouldn't get justice because it was a more important man in the social hierarchy who raped his daughter, and so he doesn't count. Mm-hmm. He doesn't count. Yu Qin, she was a little bit of an exile because she had opened her mouth about corruption, and she didn't count.
Mm-hmm.
There was no justice for her or her daughter, and so that meant there was no justice for her mother, for her friends, for her students, for the servants in her household who were arrested, because obviously they must have been guilty because they were servants, or at a minimum because they didn't protect the lady of the house.
It's a familiar story, but you find the cultural overlays to be fascinating, especially when you're watching the Japanese version compared to the Russian version, compared to the Chinese version and the American version.
It's fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating, and it's great eye candy. They really did it up well. I know that most of that train had to have been CGI, and it was flawless. It did not have the sensation that I had when we were sitting through Death on the Nile, Sir Kenny's version, and I'm thinking, that looks so fake.
Mm-hmm.
That is so perfect it looked fake. I mean, I knew that you weren't going to find train compartments like that, but it just looked super luxurious. It didn't look fake the way the SS Karnak did in Sir Kenny's Death on the Nile, which looked incredibly fake to me. I know what ships look like, and that wasn't it.
Mm-hmm. If you want to check it out yourself, I think you can find some of the episodes on YouTube. I know that the production company, which is, I think, IQIXI, it's a very unusual name. They actually have a website. It's their streaming service in which the first 7 episodes are available for free.
Or you can get the box set.
We actually went on eBay and got, there's a sellers there. They have the English language subtitled versions, and we'll find out in mid-January what we get. I'm hoping it'll be just fine. I don't see why not. These are reputable sellers we're dealing with on eBay.
So we'll find out. If you want to see a different take, a different film adaptation of Agatha Christie, this is a great opportunity. They are relatively faithful to the story and yet not European, because the only other long series that we've seen to date where we've been able to actually see it is season 1 of The Little Murders. And in that case, they've removed Poirot and Hastings or Miss Marple completely and made into police procedurals. This is still more along the lines of a private detective, with Situ Yan filling in as Poirot. So this is probably closer to what she wrote, and yet still very Chinese, than any of the other ones that we've seen.
I find it kind of funny in a way, because we were talking about the Japanese versions, and we had to kind of struggle. We went to Daily Motion and found episodes there, and there are certain episodes. I still want to see the Japanese Orient Express.
Oh my gosh, I want to see that.
And we can't get anywhere in an English translation, and yet here's the Chinese, who are supposedly not the capitalist running dogs that the Americans are, and they put out this 24 episode streaming and they put it on streaming service. They put it on DVD. Here you go. You can have it this way. You can
subtitles.
Have it this way with English
subtitles. And they're making sure we can give them their money. And yet Ashahai TV, and I'm sure I said their name wrong, they're not releasing their wonderful Agatha Christie adaptations on DVD. I don't know why, but they aren't. They're leaving money on the table. I can't believe it would be that expensive to put something on DVD when they already have all of the film, and then add subtitles, and then make it available at the American market, because lots of people would watch them because they were fabulous.
You could even put it on streaming services.
Yeah, that's right. If you put it on streaming service, you don't have to buy DVDs. But wow, this was great, and I'm looking forward to seeing the rest of the other 7 novels and short stories. I didn't realize that there was a Miss Marple buried in there.
All I could do, this is what I got off of the drama website. There's a website devoted to Chinese drama.
Okay, because I was looking at the Agatha Christie wiki, which was a little different, because it looked to me like the murder at the posh girls' school was Cat Among the Pigeons, which is what I immediately thought.
Well, we will find out.
We'll find out.
Correct the record when we can find out.
Yes, and as we watch them, I will write reviews, so you'll be able to get my take on
the website.
On the website about a Chinese Agatha Christie. Wow.
Yeah. So this concludes another episode of Agatha Christie She Watched. Thank you very much for showing up. Hit the like and subscribe button if you're on YouTube.
And if don't forget to take a ride on the train.
We'll see you at the movies. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Agatha Christie She Watched is Teresa Peschel and Bill Peschel. Produced by Bill Peschel. New episodes come out every week wherever you stream your content. If you enjoyed this podcast, You can help support us by going to anchor.fm/mystery and leaving a 5-star rating and review, and by helping to spread the word. To advertise on Mystery She Watched, email Peschel at peschelpress.com. All questions and comments can be emailed to Peschel at peschelpress.com. And thank you for listening.